I tried my best.
Yes. All of us feeling like Ric Flair, the nature boy. Woo! Here in week 7. Thank you, everybody. Hope you're enjoying this game as much as you can enjoy it. And before we jump in and pepper Dr. Gene with questions and he tries to answer the unanswerable, Matt Waldman with your Cleveland Browns. I am going to call them your Cleveland Browns, Matt. Let's get a game update.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Cleveland got Jedrick Wills back. That was probably one of the most important things, even though they're out. Baker Mayfield's out, Nick Chubb's out, Kareem Hunt's out. Having Wills back has, solidified the line as much as they could rather than having 2 really awful tackles. They only have one that played badly last week. And so as a result of that, Dearness Johnson is looking good. He's getting big creases, and when he isn't, he's been able to create with some efficient footwork, and he's been breaking tackles. They've been able to drive down the field and use different misdirection with the screen game to the tight end. Getting Jarvis Landry back has been very important. Some key catches and short yardage to convert plays, but they're getting a lot of second and short, third and medium type of plays that they can convert, and that's keeping Case Keenum efficient. And as a result, the Browns got 10 points on the board. And then Teddy Bridgewater's playing with a broken foot. Seeing him, basically short arm a throw that he couldn't really step into, in addition to maybe misgauging the coverage. The Browns have been able to cover fairly well, but a part of it too has been Bridgewater. And so it was a 10-0 deficit in the half. But, Bridgewater being the fighter that he is and then making some adjustments, they were able to, work downfield and with the short passing game, a lot of passes to Noah Fant, maybe opening up the run a little bit better, and then getting a short pass to Melvin Gordon at the inside the 10, where he was able to stretch out for the score early in the second half on their first drive.
Yeah, and most importantly, as Zari says, always lifting Zari in the chat room, John Kelly had a nice run, one run, but good to see. I liked him back at Tennessee.
Me too.
I thought there was going to be more. He had that wonderful contact balance, and we'll see. Denver trying to maybe say Patrick Shermer's job. I don't know. In Cleveland, the world famous Eric Stoner and I texted about this, Matt. That if Case Keenum goes out and the offense looks okay, what does that say about Baker Mayfield? What does that say about giving him a $30 million a year extension? No wonder he wanted to play with a broken humerus in addition to a messed up shoulder. Dr. Gene, I'm not going to ask you about that. What I'm going to ask you is who's in denial? People like me with J.D. McKissick thinking maybe he's going to get a bigger opportunity, or Washington for continuing to play Antonio Gibson with this shin stress fracture and expecting it to change like it was last week and the week before where he couldn't make it through the game.
Yeah, we'll go with Washington, but it's close. How about that?
Yeah, I'm always in denial.
Some form or another. Yeah, it's the same situation it's been for a month. And we've said it's not necessarily snap to snap, but week to week. At any point in a given week, Washington could decide that it's finally enough is enough, and then he needs to be shut down and potentially have surgery and fix the issue. Or, it's a relatively minor injury. If he can play and manage through the pain, he could get as many as 20 carries, which he's done at times over the past month or so. Last week clearly was not a good situation. I don't think in the limited practice video we've seen this week that he looks comfortable. Clearly he's not, or he wouldn't have missed as much time as he did last week. But Washington has shown us in each of the last 4 weeks prior to last week that they are comfortable giving Gibson most of the early down work and then letting McKissick handle some of the passing down duties and come from behind work. So Gibson practiced on Thursday, seemed to have done well enough. We'll see whether or not he's able to go on Friday. If you've got a Friday DNP, then that calls into question where we're going to be with him moving forward for the rest of the season. But I think we can expect to see him try to get back into the role he was playing back in September.
So, Gene, T.Y. Hilton looked pretty good in his return. I thought, he looked good on the perimeter. He also got to show flashes of that he was Marquise Brown before Marquise Brown ever donned a varsity jersey, making big plays from the slot. But then he got hurt on on a crossing route at the end of the game, re-aggravated his quad. How long do you think it's going to be before he gets back on the field now?
I don't know that he's going to play this week, and I appreciate, as always, you making me feel old by suggesting that T.Y. Hilton is old. I mean,
is that how you took it?
Yeah, I did, because I was
You're
thinking
only old
Marquise
if
Brown. I
you
mean,
if you
T.Y.
think you're
Hilton,
old.
we got Marquise Brown not wearing a varsity jersey, and my mind immediately went to, well, I guess that's how Reggie Wayne felt about T.Y. Hilton, and that's how Marvin Harrison felt about Reggie Wayne, and we could go back further and further and further along the way. So I don't know. I think it's just that I'm feeling older and older as the days and weeks pass by, as our kids get older and older. You know about this already, so I don't need to. You've been through this before I have. Hilton is saying
You'll
that
get to
he's
the other side.
50-50. That's right. Yeah.
This is
I'm
turning
just
into an
trying
on the couch episode. I just want to
I'm
say.
just trying to make him feel old now.
We're getting deep.
Ain't
He
working.
Yeah.
he never will. So Hilton himself said he's 50-50 to play this week, but you don't like it when players really aren't able to get back to practice by the middle of the week. So he's a player that doesn't need to practice. The Colts don't have their varsity players. You go with the varsity jersey. Their veteran players practice through injury if they can't. And as we've talked about a lot, veterans with soft tissue injuries know how to manage those things on the field. So I think there's a chance that he could come back and play this week. But if he does, I don't think you're going to see him see a huge number of targets or a lot of high leverage situations. So you'd almost hope that he takes a little bit of time to get right, finish off his reconditioning process, and then come back ready to go in the future.
Gene, either of the Chicago wide receivers, Darnell Mooney or Allen Robinson. I think Robinson with the ankle, he seemed fine last week.
Yeah.
Played about 92% of the snaps, so I guess he's been limited so far. Mooney, though, with the groin, I mean, any issues you think for either of them coming into week 7?
I don't think so. I think this is going to be similar situations as what we've seen with these guys in previous weeks, where Chicago is happy to limit their practice reps and then allow them to take as many snaps as they can on Sunday. Both of them have been playing pretty much full snaps. And for them, that's been over 90%, as you said, with Allen Robinson and beyond. So I expect both of them to be on the field. I didn't see anything from Allen Robinson that makes me think that this week is more doubtful than last.
Gene, we watched the injury report, and it's reminiscent of that song, the knee bone's connected to the ankle bone, whatever. But the point is that we're watching these injuries, and now in the terms of Alex Collins, it's the hip bone's connected to the glute bone's connected to the groin bone. How can we make sense out of this? Are we going to see him
You're
on Monday night?
describing
Yeah.
Cotton Hill from
Yeah.
King of the Hill.
Yeah.
He had no
Right.
or Anthony Gordon or Anthony Gibson at the end of his career at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I only heard one bone in that trilogy of body parts there. So we're
Not
gonna be able to make
anatomically
sense.
accurate. Yeah.
They shot my shins off during the war. Yeah.
It's an Antonio Gibson question again. Who are we talking about? Oh,
Alex Collins.
Collins. When I read that today, unfortunately, my thought immediately, when you hear glute, groin, hip, so on and so forth, I don't think of separate injuries. I think of the same thing, and they're just being called different things, and that makes you worry about a sports hernia or a core abdominal issue. And sometimes you'll hear that described as a hip, and all of those abdominal and pelvic muscles kind of insert along, the upper part of the thigh bone, the pelvis itself. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's going on, but I always get suspicious when that's the case. Hopefully it is nothing more than he's had a couple of different injuries and they're just close enough where that concern get raised. I didn't hear so much from Pete Carroll today that has me concerned, but this was really the first practice of the week. Thankfully, he's got an extra day to recover before Monday night's game, and we'll see what develops Friday going into Saturday morning. I would lean towards him being likely to play, but there's a lot going on in the Seattle running back depth chart right now. Chris Carson's going to be out for at least a couple of weeks. Rashad Penny is coming back. DJ Dallas has gotten a few more snaps moving forward or in the recent weeks, and now we've got Alex Collins fighting something. So practice participation here on Friday is going to be a big tale. And Pete Carroll usually gives us a pretty good idea of what to expect and suspect. So we'll see how that develops into Saturday.
Gene, any chance that you got to see Kadarius Toney's ankle injury, the mechanism of the injury? I'm just curious because he's played great, and a lot of things that he's done well, I've been happy to see because that's what he showed at Florida in limited time. But one of the things he also showed at Florida was sometimes he would cut a little too wildly and he would slip and fall, and he hurt himself doing that in training camp. And so it was like the good things on his report were there, the bad things on his report were there. And I'm wondering if he injured himself cutting or if it was just something else.
I think it was hard to tell exactly what happened as far as the aggravation goes. So One of the things, it's just Game Pass has been so frustrating this year that if the television angle doesn't show us anything useful, then it's really hard to go back and see a sideline view, or more often than not an end zone view that really gives us a good sense of what's going on. And the television angle is the only one I was able to see. He had kind of a rounded off cut there and then was taken out of bounds, and it was just difficult to tell what's what. What I thought was interesting is it looked like the foot that was taped over the shoe was the other foot and what he was limping on. So you wonder if he had just a little bit of a decoy tape job on one side, or if there's more than one thing going on here. Clearly, after looking okay on the first two catches he had, the third catch was not right. He limped off the field and just wasn't cleared to come back. And now it looks like it's going to be very much a week-to-week situation. The Giants haven't made a decision about injured reserve for any of their players yet, including Tony. It doesn't look like that's the way it's going to go. But no, you'd be concerned about high ankle injury just based on the way this has gone, but I haven't seen enough to be specific about the diagnosis and what to expect.
Gene, with Tampa Bay, Antonio Brown, I think he missed practice yesterday. And if I'm remembering correctly, it looked like they were working on his ankle at some point on the sideline during their Thursday night game. Do you think he's going to be able to make it to their game this Sunday?
Yeah, this one's concerning. I don't really like what I'm hearing about Tampa Bay from Tampa Bay for Antonio Brown or Rob Gronkowski. Brown was able to be on and off the field. He didn't take nearly as many snaps as he usually would last Thursday night, but he was in the game during the final drive last week, and I didn't see anything in particular of concern. But for him to miss both practices, for the beat writers to show some concern about him now, it's been 7 full days, including today, 8 days since the game last Thursday. So a big concern that he's not able to go. But again, another veteran player who probably does not need to practice, knows what to expect with Tom Brady. And if we see him get back to a limited practice on Friday, could easily be listed questionable in a game time decision and able to go. But there's every reason to suspect here that he may not be able to get a full complement of snaps or targets. And you'd have to wonder about whether or not his projection has any chance of hitting the ceiling or not.
You are listening to The Audible, watching The Audible, the Thursday night live show as the Cleveland Browns are driving to try to answer the score. Denver made it 10-7. We're going to do one more round with Dr. Gene. And Gene, I hesitate to even say this. You're all going to hate me for saying this. It's kind of a quiet injury week in terms of things that we're waiting on, things we've covered most of them. And then, like tonight, you have Donovan Peoples-Jones going questionable after the official start time of the game, so no one can pull him out of the lineup. So I have to watch what I say here. So I'm going to ask a question about an injury that isn't probably going to affect lineups this week, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are. It's Rob Gronkowski, and he's already missed 3 games, right? It doesn't look like he's going to play this weekend either. So walk me through the best you can how we ended up here, that when he had internal injuries and multiple broken ribs, that they didn't just put him on IR. You try to convince them he can play before 3 weeks, or they wanted to give him a chance. Why is it now going to be 4 weeks and he ended up on IR?
I think it was close enough is probably where we were. And, it was a 2 to 4 week situation, and they weren't expecting the lung injury to be a long-term concern. And he just hasn't healed as comfortably as possible. And this is an injury where it's really hard to keep your conditioning up. And a player like Gronkowski that, he was back last year and he looked great at the beginning of the season, but as a player that's dealt with lots of back issues and other things over the years. And in order for him to be available to them when they really need him down the stretch, they'd like him to be in condition and not take any chances. I think is probably where we are. Or we may well hear about when he does finally come back that there was a little bit more to the internal injuries than we originally thought, or were led to believe and reported. And that's what the consideration was. I don't think that's likely, because you said you would have expected them to put him on injured reserve if they thought this was going to be a 4 week situation. So I think it's more caution than anything else. There was some video of him sprinting on the sidelines and continuing to work on his conditioning process. So he doesn't look like he's that far away. I think they were hoping to be able to get here with him and just weren't able to do so. And now they've decided to be cautious. So, and that may be good news for Antonio Brown too, leading into that conversation that, it's possible that they might have pushed Gronkowski to play if they thought Brown really wasn't going to be able to go. So I don't know that we've heard the full story on Gronkowski yet, but more likely than not, it's just caution, and we'll see him next week.
Well, San Francisco's quarterback situation isn't really fantasy friendly. Deebo Samuel is certainly dependent on that, and the run game can be a little bit dependent on that. They certainly have the line to support a good run game. So with Trey Lance with his knee inactive, and Jimmy Garoppolo supposedly coming back, but he's got a calf injury, and those can be problematic. And as we've seen with Jimmy Garoppolo, he's one of those guys that maybe he needs to be in tip-top shape to finish a game. So what's your thoughts on Garoppolo's calf and the chances that we might see Nate Sudfeld?
Yeah, Garoppolo looks like he's going to be good to go. I think they're just sort of seeing how the calf responds to a little bit more work, but I think they knew going into this week that he was going to be okay. Sounds like this was more of a bruise than it was a strain, and given a couple of extra weeks to heal here, I don't think he's going to have too much difficulty. It's a little bit disappointing for Trey Lance's injury to have originally heard that it was a 1 to 2 week situation, and then for him not to be cleared to practice this week probably says more about where Garoppolo is and what the team feels about their quarterback situation going forward than Lance. Again, a player that wasn't put on injured reserve, knowing that Garoppolo's coming back healthy, probably just not worth putting him out there in harm's way during practice. But you'd hope for him, Lance, that is, to be able to come back next week and get practice, and hopefully Garoppolo makes it through this week. But I don't think there's too much concern about whether or not Sudfeld's going to play. He'll be the backup with Lance inactive, I would imagine, but Garoppolo's going to start.
Gene, I don't know about any of the rest of the guys here on the show tonight, but I actually do like Chipotle. Apparently, AJ Brown doesn't like Chipotle. Can't seem to keep any food down at this point. I mean, can we expect him to play at all this weekend? I mean, there's legitimate concern between him and also Julio Jones also not being able to practice.
Yeah, I would imagine that Brown is closer to playing than Julio. Julio at least was back to practice on Thursday, but again, just time after time dealing with these chronic hamstring issues, and if he does play, you wouldn't expect him to see a full complement of snaps. Brown, I think, could play. What we don't know is exactly what sort of infection is going on here. It's a little bit unusual for a food poisoning type situation to start leaking over into a week. Sorry, that was bad. I was not intended at all.
I like this is my favorite question because we finally get Chris to get off the rails a little bit. He might have snuck one in on you, Gene. Look at you leaking.
This is Bloom's side of things.
It is. Sure. It is. This is where we always want to. It's brought to you by Olestra.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah, we won't.
Or any other pharmaceutical that has side effects.
Well, how about for the folks that have AJ Brown are hoping he's back in lineups, we should be supported by Imodium, I would imagine, instead. But, he's at least tweeting through it, so to speak. He sounds like he wants to recover. He was able to play. By the way, this whatever business he was talking that he is going to have his snap count restricted until week 10. There was nothing behind that. I don't think that was meaningful at all. Hopefully he didn't karma himself into food poisoning and then miss some time because of that, because I don't think there was really much concern about, his conditioning or his hamstrings moving forward. So I think he's likely to play. He's got a couple of days to recover yet, but he could see his snaps reduced a little bit just because, when you get to this point, a week into an illness like this, conditioning and hydration are big issues. So I think they'll get him ready to play. They can certainly manage the situation through the game, but it may be a bit before he's back to his usual self.
All right. Well, I don't know where to go from that because really that's where the real show should start. Now, Dr. Dean is always doing great stuff for us here. You always get the drop and can read through some of the strange things that we hear and that we don't hear about injuries with Dr. Dean's help. Be back with us Sunday morning. Me and Chris doing some start sits. We always appreciate your time, Doc, and we'll make sure to keep it on the up and up without you here.
Always. All right. Good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you on Sunday. See you.
All right. As we wait for Matt Waldman taking a short break, so the Browns go down and score. They've let the fullback touch the ball 3 times tonight. Johnny Stanton with the touchdown. Case Keenum has completed passes to 10 different receivers tonight. For real, Matt. I mean, it's your team. It's the Browns. Do you trust this front office, Andrew Berry, to understand that Baker Mayfield is not a $30 million a year quarterback? Or is this basically inevitable at this point? Because I think Case Keenum is really showing that Baker Mayfield is not adding value to this offense, that the value is in the offense and the execution of the offense and not the quarterback adding value. Well, as a Browns fan and just as a general football strategist, How do you think this is going to go? I think we all know how it should go.
I think that it's really hard to tell. I mean, I would like to lean on the idea that they see the same things with Baker Mayfield, considering that in the Chargers game, they actually would not take the training wheels off and let him win that game and try and go after it. They didn't trust him. And you could see that in the final drive. I saw it. Mark Schofield saw it. Jake Burns, who covers the Browns in the OBR, seen it. We've talked about all this extensively on his show from weeks to week. And it's, we want to see it, but the Browns know that they put this offense in because they know what Mayfield can do. The problem is that I think the city is split. You have kind of like the Miami Dolphins mentality that they see Justin Herbert and they think that every quarterback should be Justin Herbert in the same way that the league saw Ben Roethlisberger and thought every team should be what Roethlisberger was when he just came into the league on fire. And that's just not fair, not right, makes no sense. And it hurts teams long term when they get reactive like that. And I think that there's a part of the Cleveland Browns fan base that when they see a well-completed corner route or a play that Baker Mayfield's supposed to make, they see that as special and elite because they're starved for the positive. They want everything positive. They don't want any more negative. And I get that. I mean, I've been a Browns fan, so I know. But the point is I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a close call. I didn't think it was going to be a close call, and I was kind of lamenting it because I thought the Browns were going to be mistaken looking at the ease of schedule they had last year and what Mayfield wasn't able to do, making those key plays. But now I think it's become more apparent that they've had an actual legit schedule of competitive teams, that they're now in a situation that it could be a close call. They might look at it and go, yeah, you know what? Matt Ryan has an out in 2022. Maybe we trade for him. And we are in a window of contention. We have a good defense. We have the great offensive line. It's not going to stay that way forever. Certainly, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt aren't going to stay healthy forever. I mean, they're not healthy right now. And they've got, the receivers that they have. Another guy that they could trade for, well, I mean, the Miami Dolphins I agree with Lance Riddick. They're ludicrous for wanting to get rid of Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa has played just fine for a guy with limited reps, with basically Mac Hollins, Durham Smythe, and Mike Gesicki getting open because teams have to react to the one guy they do have, Jalen Waddle. Oh, and that Devonta Parker, he's kind of half Chiquita like Will Fuller. So it's, it's one of those deals where, I would gladly take Tua Tagovailoa, though a lot of people might say that's crazy, and they look at the stats and cite the box score. But when you look at the film, Mayfield's issues in the pocket, you see, Keenum's getting a lot of time, but he's making quick, efficient plays, and he stays in the pocket a little bit better, and he seems to be accurate with, as he's supposed to. But a lot of this tonight, to be honest, and why it's going to be close is a lot of it's the Denver line. They're allowing creases open, like, basically a doctor saying open wide and let me stick the stick and say because that's what their defensive front is doing right now.
Yeah, really, the Broncos are playing this game like they're double parked. They just want to get, they want to get a ticket and go home. We'll see what happens here. Poor Teddy. By the way, I just want to let you know that this is like Chekhov's gun, Matt. Zach says, Waldman bass solo, please. So one of these days, he asked for some Jaco Pastorius, and one of these times when you're on the couch, Matt, I'll induce you. If I'm nice, maybe you'll tell the story about your connection to Jaco Pastorius and all that other.
I have none.
Yeah, right. See, that's exactly how to set up the cliffhanger, folks. One of these days, for those of you who understand how important that name is, or how storied that name is. So we'll see. Did you ever watch, Matt, by the way, I think I sent you a long time ago, like years ago, that Indonesian bass playing prodigy, like the 9 or 10-year-old kid, I think his name's Gev Gev Delano, who can play like Jaco Pastorius bass solos, like note for note, like they line it up with the music. He has an Instagram. He's incredible. He's a total prodigy. Baker Mayfield, not a prodigy. Watch Baker Mayfield, I think he went number 1 overall. Same thing with Jared Goff. You watch him, you think, wow, They went number 1 overall. And you just hope that a team doesn't take a quarterback number 1 overall that doesn't at least have something that makes the game a little asymmetrical for the opposing team. Even like what Matt was saying about Ben Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger could hang in against contact with players, hanging off of him and make throws with arm strength and brute strength. But like Matt pointed out, he was so good as a rookie. And Roethlisberger, people forget that when Roethlisberger came into the league, it was still considered a bad thing for a quarterback to come in as an underclassman. I think only Michael Vick at that point had come in as an underclassman and had some measure of success in the NFL. So when Roethlisberger came in as an underclassman from the MAC, had only in this last year there, I think the one game against a Big 5 team was against Iowa, and Iowa destroyed him. And there were people pointing at it saying, bad pick, bad pick. And then he came in and did what he did because he had so much support and structure around him. Let's not leave that out. But what I'm setting up here, Chris, I'm going somewhere with this, I promise, is when we think about the rookie quarterbacks this year, Justin Fields, interesting game this weekend against Tampa Bay. Zach Wilson coming out of a bye, rematch with New England, who absolutely frustrated and just beleaguered him. 4 sacks, 4 interceptions. It was almost, he wanted to throw in the towel like Rocky for him. Trevor Lawrence kind of reaching a little bit of a cruising altitude. At least we're not talking about Urban Meyer. I mean, it was the Miami pass defense without their top 2 corners, but he's looking more competent. Do you think, like Matt is saying, basically, we have these unrealistic expectations for rookie quarterbacks, and they've all seemed underwhelming, but actually they're just playing like rookie quarterbacks? Do you think they might get better? Is this something we should be at least open to when we're thinking about the Jets, the Jacksonville offense, the Chicago offense as we go forward?
Absolutely. I mean, and think about that rookie season for Baker. Like, what was it? They had multiple restaurants and bars around town that had the coolers with beer locked, and like after Baker wound up winning, the city went nuts. Like after that happened, after he came in for that game, Tyrod gets hurt, he comes back and wins, and it's almost like, it's over. Like, Cleveland is back. They now have a functional quarterback, and now to see them kind of take that step back, it's almost like it's almost like an overreaction to what they're seeing right now, because they don't want to go back to those times having to figure out what their quarterback is going to be, or how dysfunctional that offense could wind up being. And the same thing for the 3 teams that you mentioned. Think about what New York for the Jets have had to deal with over the past few years, whether it's been Adam Gase, whether it's been Sam Darnold, whether it's been like Joe Flacco for a time or two, and even with Jacksonville with Blake Bortles. I mean, it's been a nightmare for a number of those teams, which, especially at the very least for Chicago, have been at least somewhat prominent in terms of being able to make it to the playoffs, at least having some sort of stance or some sort of stature within the league itself. And so now to see them have to more or less retailer their offense to these rookie quarterbacks, I mean, especially with Justin Fields, it's who do we want to side with? Do we want to side with the rookie quarterback, especially in Justin Fields' case, who is at the very least, I guess, more of that he is like what the offense should be structured around, not whatever Bill Lazor and Matt Nagy come to terms with regarding how they're going to call plays on a week-to-week basis. And I think this week is going to be the real test, especially against Tampa, because if they're not coming out with any sort of pass-heavy or at least some sort of scripted plays that lean on Justin Fields' strengths as not just a downfield passer, but also as a runner as well, then we know that there's something wrong, that there's really no real, I guess, leverage for them to say that we can't, like, Justin Fields is not the one making them work. No, it has to be them at that point. So I think that's where we as fans, like the folks like watching from home and trying to comment on these games, it's difficult for us to kind of take it in, because we see the talent. Like, we see their ability from, at least from where we're sitting at home, that their capability of being able to pilot these offenses. But when they're kind of hamstrung either by the personnel that they might be working with. So in Trevor Lawrence's case, like, while I'm a huge fan of Marvin Jones, I mean, Cincinnati Bengals fan, like, I'm happy to see them there. But is it a long-term solution for him? No. I mean, the same thing for Laviska Shenault. I mean, while young, I think he's a raw talent, but also, is he going to be a primary option for Trevor Lawrence, like week in and week out? No, they need more there. They need more along the offensive line. And the same thing for Zach Wilson. I'm really liking what Matt LaFleur, solid, like what they've tried to structure around him. But still, if you go from a strong offensive line at BYU to the injuries they've had there with Elijah Vera Tucker being out, hopefully they get Mekhi Becton back. It's just what can you expect to see from Zach Wilson as well? So it's just trying to at least put realistic limits on our expectations for each of those. But like you mentioned, when we see Justin Herbert come out and completely ball out, when we see like some of the other rookie quarterbacks completely come in and kind of take over their offenses, even Joe Burrow, even though he was inefficient throughout the most of his rookie season, but just seeing Cincinnati come out and just continue to throw, continue to fire, continue to at least show some fight after however many woeful seasons with Andy Dalton, it's just like now we can have some hope. Now the city can actually have at least some sort of stance behind like that particular offense, behind the particular team. And when we're not seeing that, like when we're only seeing Justin Fields pass 21, 22 times, and we're only getting limited reps out of Tua Tagovailoa, even though I think I 100% agree with Matt. I thought it looked sharp, even though, again, against Jacksonville, whatever. But to see him come back, immediately operate out of that quick passing scheme, I thought he played great. But it's just we want to see that happen so quickly after years of watching loss after loss after loss. It does become tough for fans in order to like stay hopeful, to stay the course and be faithful to their particular franchise. So I get it, but we still also have to at least have some sort of reasonable level expectation because they are rookies. They are learning. Trevor Lawrence, I think, is probably the one that has shown the most promise so far. But I think the rest of them will come along. It's just, again, they're for the most part, they're just hamstrung by their current situation.
Yeah, there's a lot, and I love it, man. Let it go, Chris. Let it flow, man. No, really, because I mean, there's a lot of fantasy football takes and a lot of things we can do, but all of this stuff matters for fantasy football. I mean, there's a real simple takeaway of can these players get better? Can the quarterbacks get better? And offenses get better as the season goes on? But as you, Matt, have laid out, it's expectations. And I think with Fields, what's going to be interesting this weekend, you almost root for Tom Brady and the Bucs to jump out to a lead so that Matt Nagy has no choice. And they have to just let him play. I said on the show today, previewing this game, like sometimes you have to let him wreck the car so he can learn how to drive, I mean, especially a player like Fields where the magic is going to happen at those limits of his game that other players don't have, where he can make things happen. And if you don't let him see what works and what doesn't work, or just, get his blood flowing, and then how are you going to know? It's really frustrating. The Tua Tagovailoa thing is frustrating. They don't seem to want to give him an opportunity to show what he can do. So it's expectations. And it's okay for the fans to have expectations. It's okay even for the media to stoke those expectations. But the professionals, the adults that run these organizations should be better than that. And they should be listening to Matt Waldman. But we haven't gotten Matt Waldman to run an organization quite yet. One of these days, if he wants to, that's his choice. But let's talk about the Browns. Let's get another little game update here. We've got about 10 minutes left on Thursday night show. What are the Browns up to?
I mean, just looking at what we've seen, I mean, they're still just running the ball. And I mean, I think they're just controlling this game. I mean, I don't see anything that's really all that different other than just, efficient run game, controlled passing game. And Denver just basically not being able to hold up. I mean, Von Miller's still out, looks like, after being out at halftime. So, this game looks like, barring a massive mistake on Cleveland's part, which it's still tight enough to have one, they're in a good spot.
And they are in a good spot. And, if they had something, a play break their way against Kansas City and a play break their way against the Chargers, they would have gone into last week's game against the Cardinals at 5-0 with wins over the Chargers and Chiefs. I'm sorry, the Chiefs. Yeah. And they would have been 5-0. And sure, they would have lost last week. It was miserable. Baker Mayfield was hurt. They didn't really have any answers. Both of their tackles were out. But then we would have given them a mulligan on that. So, they're still a team. When you look at the AFC, it's Buffalo, it's one out of Tennessee and Indianapolis, it's Baltimore, it's Kansas City and the Chargers. I mean, I don't think the Chargers have it that much in their DNA to choke. And then there's a couple of playoff spots. As we're, like Chris, we talked about this last week. Cincinnati comes into this picture. Let's see what they do against Baltimore. And Cleveland comes into this picture, with 7 playoff teams. And Cleveland, after the way they played the Chargers and the Chiefs on the road, if they get into the tournament, they should feel like, hey, we can hang with these teams. We can play with these teams. And in a one-game situation, why not? Why not us? So it's good to see them show that they are the better team here, because the Broncos were a team that the schedule created a counterfeit 3-0 start for them. So it makes sense. And also, I think folks are maybe, if they didn't know, because Matt, you were calling for Case Keenum like at the beginning of last year, or saying, hey, watch out for Case Keenum, right? It's not a drop off.
It is to a certain extent in terms of arm talent, but yeah, in terms of just knowledge of the game, managing the game, making, being able to make the throws you're supposed to make, I think it's not far off, and Keenan may have more experience.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the experience. And what you see about Case Keenum that's enjoyable to watch him play is he does still play in that eye of the storm with that calm. He comes into the game as a backup, but he's ice cold when it comes to feeling. I think it's because he's so familiar with the offense. His best year of his career came with Kevin Stefanski as the offensive coordinator back in 2017. It feels like forever ago that Keenum was the opening day starter for Denver, right? That was just 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Like it's like NFL geological time, right? Like you look in the fossil record, he was actually a Denver Broncos quarterback just 3 years ago. Guys, I'm having trouble coming up with like hot take fantasy topics, because here's the deal with week 7. If you have a warm body who's going to get like 5 targets or touches, you're playing him, right? I guess I'll just ask this, Chris. Is there any deep we already had Dearness Johnson. I almost had trouble putting Dearness Johnson in my sleeper column today because he's not really a sleeper. He's a starting running back. Every starting running back, even Devontae Booker, is going to get into the lineup this week. Is there anyone in your back pocket? We're probably going to talk about these guys on Sunday morning, Chris, but anyone in your back pocket, ace up your sleeve, or even like a 5 up your sleeve that you can play this week for people?
And that's the thing. I'm trying to figure out like who would really be out there that most folks haven't already either picked up or stashed. I mean, if you want to try and take a look at like players like Quez Watkins. I mean, now with Zach Ertz being traded, I think he's been a fun little player like so far, like for Jalen Hurts. But now with Dallas Goedert like still being on the COVID list, he could probably be a guy that can at least get you a splash play here or there, and especially in this game that we expect to be somewhat up tempo and at least like not necessarily high scoring, but at least a decent amount of scoring as compared to the rest of Sunday's games. I mean, he could wind up being a guy that can give you some punch on your roster. What, Nick Westbrook-Akine? Now, since we were talking earlier with Dr. Gene about both Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, like if A.J. Brown can go, at the very least, on their in their last game, or at least the Monday night game against the Bills, it was like Westbrook-Akine that came in to replace Julio Jones when he went out. So it'd be another guy that you can possibly slot in. So it's just, again, I think you got it right. I mean, if you can tell yourself a story about any of these guys that might be on the waiver wire, seeing the field, getting maybe 2, 3, 4 touches, and the possibility of them maybe falling into the end zone, then yeah, I think that I wouldn't push back on any of them unless they, are just on a team that has almost no hope for being able to make it out of that game with more than a couple of touchdowns in total for their entire team. But other than that, no, I'm not going to push back on that.
I'm glad you brought up team totals too, because that's one way to navigate these kind of decisions when you're just throwing something against the wall and seeing what sticks. Like, why not go with someone from the Kansas City, Tennessee game? I mean, that's good. What is it, 58 over under, something like that? So, this is guys like Byron Pringle, DeMarcus Robinson,
Jarrett Patterson, if you want to stash him, just in case something happens with Antonio Gibson.
Right. I've been telling people Tyler Johnson, if Antonio Gibson can't, that's your guy, man. Tyler Johnson. Matt, Tyler Johnson can play, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He's a good possession receiver. He's going to get open middle, and Tom Brady trusts him.
Yeah, so if he gets on the field, he could easily have like same kind of numbers that Antonio Brown puts up, like 7 for 80 and a touchdown. So we'll watch this stuff as we get up to game time. We'll go over the stuff with Dr. Gene. Some other guys to think about if you're doing some shuffling of your bench to try to make sure you can field a full lineup with DJ Dallas, the whole Alex Collins situation. So you're looking for these injury situations that are uncertain, a few of them that are, and maybe somebody that you can pivot to if we find out Sunday morning that there will be opportunity. And again, I'll remind everybody that you have that opportunity on Sunday morning to join Chris Allen and myself and Dr. Jene Bramel. And you all already know about Matt Waldman and everything that you have with the RSP, the top 10. And folks, we appreciate the opportunity to serve you as always. If you're here watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on the podcast, you want to check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguys. Like the videos, comment. It's funny. We have a few people in our chat room, guys, that are kind of like I don't know what I would call them. Like, they're kind of like bouncers. They're kind of like cheerleaders, where they're like, come on, there's 78 people watching and only 12 likes. So I appreciate that, because it's hard for me sometimes to remember that because I just get engrossed here with my friends talking about football. So like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel. We love seeing those numbers grow. That's how our engagement helps create more engagements with people out there. It helps YouTube pick up our videos and suggest them to people that might find value in them like you have. And of course, the video channel is growing. You're going to find a lot of great stuff out there daily. And we've got short videos. We've got long form. Of course, Devin Knotts is doing a DFS thing on Saturday nights to help you out with setting up your DFS lineups. Again, we'll be back Sunday morning and we'll start all over again like we do because we love it, because we love sharing the journey of the season with you. We like being part of your life and having you be part of ours here at Football Guys. So on behalf of Dr. Gene, Matt Waldman, Chris Allen, Cecil, who we did not get, so he's going to save it all for the recap show. Cecil, see, what y'all probably don't know is during the show today, Cecil, he said we've had a few good Cecil rants. I would joke, not completely joking, that there's a show within the show, at least one, of how is Cecil feeling about covering the Denver Broncos. And at different points during the years we've done this show, well, you know, he's not afraid to show how he feels about it. And yeah, it's been another rough year to cover the Broncos. And he said he might pop in during this game, depending on how it was going. And he may or may not break open a bottle or something. So maybe we'll just keep that bottle on ice for Sunday night for the recap. So again, folks, thank you so much. And we'll see what's going on here. It looks like right now, Denver's trying to drive. So we may have some drama yet tonight. We'll all get to enjoy it together. Folks, as always, we love spending time with you. Stay classy.